There's a very specific kind of anxiety that only 90s gamers understand. It's the sound of a creaking door opening into a black void, waiting for a room to load. Back in 1996, we didn't see those door animations as loading screens. We saw them as a stay of execution, because we knew that on the other side of that door, something was waiting for us. Something with rotting skin, a moan that stayed with you long after you turned the console off, and a hunger for Jill sandwiches. Welcome back to Retro Dads Gaming. Today, we're going back to the Spencer Mansion. We're talking about the birth of survival horror, the frustration of tank controls, and how Resident Evil accidentally prepared an entire generation of us for the jump scares and resource management of actual parenting. If you remember the first time that dog jumped through the window in the hallway, grab a green herb and settle in. This is the story of Resident Evil and the birth of the dad reflex. To understand why Resident Evil hit so hard, you have to remember what gaming looked like in the mid-90s. We were coming off the back of Mario and Sonic. Games were bright, fast, and generally safe. Even the 3D transition was mostly about polygons and colorful mascots. Then Capcom dropped us into a remote forest outside Raccoon City. The opening cinematic, with the live-action actors and the hilariously bad dialogue, felt like a B-movie we weren't supposed to be watching. It was campy, sure, but the moment you stepped into the Great Hall, the atmosphere shifted. The fixed camera angles didn't just look cinematic, they were predatory. They hid things from you. You could hear a zombie dragging its feet, but because of the camera angle, you couldn't see it until it was literally breathing on your neck. This was the birth of survival horror. It wasn't about how many enemies you could kill. It was about whether you had enough bullets to make it to the next save point. And in 1996, that felt like a whole new kind of pressure. We have to talk about the elephant in the room: tank controls. If you try to show Resident Evil to a kid today, they'll spend 5 minutes spinning in circles and running into walls. They'll ask, why can't I just move this stick where I want to go? But here's the dad take. The tank controls were part of the horror. In a modern game, you're an agile superhero. In original Resident Evil, you were a human being in a state of panic. That slight delay in turning, that clunky, heavy feeling of trying to back away from a hunter, mimicked the feeling of a nightmare where your legs feel like lead. It stripped away your power. It forced you to be deliberate. You couldn't just twitch shoot your way out of the Spencer Mansion. You had to plan every turn, every hallway, and every escape route. It was the first time a game demanded patience as much as skill. This is where the dad part of the story really hits home. Resident Evil taught us about the item box and the limited inventory. As Jill or Chris, you only had a few slots. Do you take the ink ribbon so you can save? Do you take the extra clips? Or do you take the crank you might need 3 floors from now? Tell me that isn't exactly like packing a diaper bag for a day trip. You're standing there, looking at your inventory, realizing you have to leave the small key behind to make room for a green herb, just like you have to leave your own sandwich behind to make room for an extra set of baby wipes and a spare pacifier. Resident Evil turned us into master strategists. It taught us that resources are finite. Every bullet was a choice. Every save was a luxury. When you finally found a safe room and that calming music started playing, that was the 90s version of finally getting the kids to sleep and sitting down in a quiet kitchen for 5 minutes. Let's talk about the hallway. You know the one. You've walked through it 3 times. It's quiet. You're starting to feel safe. And then the glass shatters. Those Cerberus hounds jumping through the window is arguably the most famous jump scare in gaming history. For many of us, that was the moment our dad reflexes were born. It was the moment we learned to expect the unexpected. Now, 20+ years later, we use those same reflexes when we hear a glass break in the kitchen, or a mysterious thump from the upstairs bedroom at 2 a.m. Resident Evil wired our brains to stay alert in the dark. It turned us into the protectors. We learned how to clear a room, how to check our corners, and how to handle a crisis, even if the crisis is just a toddler who had a bad dream instead of a T-virus mutation. The Spencer Mansion is more than just a level. It's a character. It's a puzzle box that taught us how to think spatially. Even today, when we play the incredible RE2 remake or Resident Evil Village, the DNA is the same. It's that feeling of being trapped in a place that makes no sense, looking for a shield key to open a door that leads to a jewel that fits into a statue. It's ridiculous, but it's iconic. It's the game that proved horror could be a thinking man's genre. It wasn't just gore for the sake of gore. It was a mystery that required us to be sharp even when we were terrified. It gave us a sense of accomplishment that a leveling up in an RPG just couldn't match. We've talked about the visuals and the jump scares, but we have to give credit to the unsung hero of the Spencer Mansion, the sound design. In a modern game, we have 7.1 surround sound that tells us exactly where a threat is. In 1996, we had the macabre soundtrack and the sound of our own heartbeat. Think about the music in the save room. It's iconic because it's the only time the game allows your shoulders to drop. But then you step back out into the hallway and the music cuts out. All you hear is the rhythmic thud-thud of your own boots on the floorboards and that distant, wet, dragging sound of a zombie's foot. As dads, we live by our ears. We can hear a feverish cough through two closed doors, or the sound of a forbidden snack being opened in the kitchen from a mile away. Resident Evil forced us to listen to our environment. It taught us that silence isn't peace, it's a warning. There's a layer of nostalgia here that the younger generation will never understand: the instruction manual. When you bought Resident Evil on the PS1, you didn't just get a disc, you got a survival guide. Before you even hit the power button, you were sitting in the car or on the bus flipping through those pages. You were reading the bios for STAR's Alpha Team. You were looking at the grainy renders of the weapons. That manual built the dread before the game even started. It made the world feel tangible. In 2025, everything is a digital tutorial, but back then, we had to do our homework. We had to understand the herb mixing charts and the weapon stats before we set foot in the mansion. It added a layer of responsibility. You felt like you were part of an actual tactical unit. That sense of preparation is something every dad understands. The pre-game check before the family vacation or the big school project. It's all in the planning. The beautiful irony of being a retro dad is seeing the cycle repeat. I remember playing this in a dark basement, jumping at every shadow, and eventually having to turn the lights on just to finish the lab section. Now, I see my own kids playing modern horror, and I see that same wide-eyed terror. But there's a difference. Those games are often about the chase. Resident Evil was about the wait. It's a powerful thing to sit down with your teenager and show them where modern horror started. To show them that you don't need 4K textures to be terrified. You just need a fixed camera, a limited supply of bullets, and the feeling that you are utterly alone. It's a bonding moment, passing the torch of the survivalist mindset from one generation to the next. So we've cleared the mansion, we've survived the lab, and we've made it to the helipad. Resident Evil isn't just a game in our collection, it's a milestone in our lives. It's the game that made us grow up. It moved us away from saving the princess into saving ourselves. It taught us that even when the tank controls of life feel clunky, and even when our inventory is overflowing with responsibilities, we can still solve the puzzle. We can still find the emblem, unlock the door, and get the family to safety. Thank you for sticking with me through this deep dive into the archives of Raccoon City. This community of retro dads is growing every day, and it's because of your stories, so keep them coming. Tell me about the first time you ran out of ammo against a hunter. Tell me about the friend who was too scared to even watch you play. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the algorithm find more STARS members in the wild. I'm Retro Dad, and this has been Retro Dads Gaming. Log out. Stay retro.